And in this case, we did not build some IT or something technological. We built an organizational model. We built a governance framework. But this researcher, this is important, he or she also has to leave one foot in the university. Yeah? So this person needs to be connected to the department, to the institute and the university to remain this research and publication cycle. Of course, they also want to do their PhD after a couple of years, but this creates a very intense, a human-based, a people-based link, knowledge link between university and companies. And we as universities can learn a lot, and the companies can, I would say, from my perspective, benefit a lot from this.
Welcome to the New Process Podcast. Learn all the tools, methods, and best practices combined with people, emotions, and a human-centric mindset to rethink your process and push it to the next level. And here is your host, Mirko Kloppenberg.
Yeah, welcome to episode 8 of the New Process Podcast, where we are going to talk about how to get to the cutting edge of BPM with Professor Dr. Daniel Beimborn from University of Bamberg. I'm really happy to have Daniel here on the podcast. I know Daniel since 2009 when we started a joint research project, and I really appreciate his experience. Today, Daniel is Professor for Information Systems at University of Bamberg since 2018. Before that, he was Professor for Information Systems at Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. There he also headed the Process Lab together with Professor Dr. Jürgen Moormann. He was visiting scholar at MIT and Georgia State University. He holds a diploma and a PhD from Goethe University, Frankfurt, and he is doing research in the fields of digital transformation and innovation, outsourcing management, IT and process standardization, and enterprise architecture management. In this episode, we're going to talk about the hot BPM research topics, the topics he is doing research on, his recommendations to rethink processes, and way more. So a lot of inspirations on how to stay at the cutting edge of the BPM development. Enjoy the interview with Daniel.
And now, let's start to rethink processes.
Yeah, welcome, Daniel. Great to have you here at the New Process Podcast, especially as my third interview guest. So that's really cool to have you here.
Hi, moin. I'm looking very forward to that.
That's cool. Yeah, then let's start right into the interview, and let's start with a check-in. As you know, I've been working for an airline for several years, so we have to start with a check-in. And the first check-in question is there: what do you prefer in an aircraft, an aisle or a window seat?
Yeah, so... public sector, we often have to fly eco class. So then the distance to the front, to the previous seat is important. And I actually then prefer aisle to, give my knees a little bit more. You can stretch them. It's nicer for me, actually, the aisle seat. Yeah. It doesn't feel too compressed.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have the same challenges on the aircraft as well.
Yeah,
so, that's
tall guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very good. And the second check-in question is, what is your favorite airport?
I prefer the small ones. Yeah, so Bamberg is close to Nuremberg, and I like to leaving from Nuremberg. It's very short walks. It's short queues, actually. So I think also security staff, therefore, is less stressed. It's more friendly. So this is one of my favorites. And then if it's more about the international glamour airports, I probably would opt for Changi in Singapore. So that's kind of my favorites.
Okay. Yeah, I also like Nuremberg as well because it's so small and you can get really quickly to the aircraft. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I still remember my visits at Bamberg that time, flying via Nuremberg. Yeah. That's great. Okay, now let's get a little bit closer to the process topic we'll have on the agenda for today. So, what was the best process you have ever experienced?
Wow, it's hard to say because we usually remember the not so smoothly working processes, right? I have done lots of research in the finance sector, in banking and so forth. So if I remember there's of course many bad processes, but both on the fintech side, but also some innovative banks, they have created some impressive process. When I think about opening a brokerage depot with Trade Republic or fintechs like this, if you think within a couple of minutes, you can start as a new customer, you can start buying Bitcoins or ETFs or so. This is, if you know what is behind that, which kind of steps in terms of regulations, etc., have to be accomplished. This is really, really impressive. But also some old banks which have created their innovation initiatives that brought them like mobile credit application processes or so, where you can standing in media market and you'll figure out you need a consumer loan for your new TV. You open within minutes, you can get a loan. That's quite impressive. But also when we come to processes where physical goods are involved. Actually, I just visited a couple of weeks ago. I visited Musiktroman, which is one of the largest online retailers for musical instruments and equipment. They're close by here to Bamberg, and it's just impressive. It's like Amazon, kind of 15, 20 minutes from click to ship, right? From you push the buy button and the box is in the DHL truck. And if you see the different generations of warehouses that they have and more robotization and stuff like this, with camera-based quality control and all of that. That's just impressive, actually. Yeah? And it runs very smoothly and flawlessly. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting to know because I ordered some of my equipment there as well. So that's interesting. Cool. Very good. Yeah, so we already talked a little bit about processes, and let's get closer to the main part of our flight today. Let's board, and therefore, how would you describe your relationship to processes?
Relationship to process, it's a long-term relationship, actually. It's long-term, and of course, academic, it's research-oriented. So I studied originally business administration, and during my studies of management, I went into information systems, into what we call in Germany Wirtschaftsinformatik or business informatics, and process management is a big part of information systems because information system students get educated, first of all, in modeling business processes and data structures and so forth. So when I did my studies as graduate student, it happened that I was in a course on managing business processes. That was my first information systems course, and this brought me actually into information systems. So I learned to model processes and then to think about how can we, based on the models that we could generate, how can we optimize the processes, how can we integrate them, how can we increase automation through IT systems and so forth. So this was what the course was about. And then I became research assistant and I took over the kind of the course, so supported my professor in teaching this course and preparing all the materials, doing the exercises with the students. So it's very long term, actually. So this is how I got into the world of processes and process management. And since then, I have done all my research, and not all, but lots of my research in this field, and also try to put this myself into teaching, of course, as well. That's so long term, I think, describes this quite well. Yeah.
Very good. And now, right now, you're a professor for information systems at the University of Bamberg. And what are the hot BPM topics right now? The hot BPM research topics?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's because process management has been around for decades, actually, for many years. And I would argue process management in academia, in the academic world, in the university world, and research world is part of information systems because The information systems people, they design kind of the what we call the nervous system, and they are responsible for making sure that information within the organization flows from where it's created to where it's needed. And this goes very much along with process design and process implementation. So a big part of information systems community is doing research on process management, and the BPM, the business process management community, is a part of this larger business informatics or information systems world. So, and we have lots of research going on. And because of this relationship to the IT world, I would argue that lots of the hot BPM topics or the process management topics are technology related, of course. So for the last years, we have seen two big fields. One is process mining, of course. That's where because we have more and more opportunities to collect data about how processes actually are enacted in organizations. So we have nice documentations about our processes, but often we don't have any idea, any clue about what's actually happening in our companies, right? So how much process variation do we have? How much unnecessary loops, and where are the bottlenecks and all of this? And process mining has given us the chance, based on timestamps in the data, based on traces, digital traces, to get the true picture about, or a truer picture, so to say, about processes. And research is very strong in this field. So I just looked at the agenda for, in September, we will have the next Business Process Management Conference. This is the international gathering of researchers from all over the world coming together. And this is a big part. So designing process models, automatically validating process models, and then, of course, this data-enabled, data-driven process mining. So this is one field. And the other field is also very technology-related, is what we've called robotic process automation, or even AI-based smart automation. The idea that people who work in processes, so our workforce, our shop floor people, they can design and implement their own little workflows, their own little processes. So a person sitting in front of a computer, a clerk, a person that administers lots of repetitive work, for example, checking invoices and forwarding them to certain accounts, departments, and so forth. And we have these systems that allow them to build their own robots on their desktop computers, and making them taking over the work that humans have done. So we call this democratization of process management, because now we have more and more tools where regular employees who work in processes can manage their process. They can design them, they can increase their own automation and so forth. And this is where also research is going on. And I think you asked for the hot topics. This is what we've seen for the last 5 to 10 years. And I would argue that this now comes together. This is what I would call hot now, that the analytical part, that we have these process mining technologies or tools and the data. And on the other side, these little process robots or virtual robots, which get more and more, which get smarter and smarter based on AI, that we can bring this together so that processes learn themselves how to improve, how to optimize, right? So the robot gets feedback from process mining, so to say, in simplified words, and based on this can adjust itself or himself, herself, however you would call a robot. I think this is what the next years will bring, exciting new stuff, both in research and, of course, in all these companies that work on the tools that we use for this. So I think this is what I would think is one of the hottest fields in research that's going on, where we can expect a lot, actually.
Okay, that's super fascinating, because I have been involved in some of these activities in my last position as well, but they were just at the real beginning. So what do you expect? How long will it take until we can see these first ideas in the reality, in the organizations?
Yeah, I think it's very incrementally, and it's probably not kind of a revolutionary thing that we will observe. I think it's more under the hood. So we've seen process mining now for years. So we've seen this in banks, how they optimize their processes, how they analyze and optimize their processes based on process mining. And we've seen more and more RPA cases, and we see these technologies getting smarter and smarter. So the learning and training process gets easier. And I think that we have this in the tools already, that this is brought together more and more. Mm-hmm. And it will be little use cases in little process steps, right? And then in very unspectacular things. Imagine you're sitting as an assistant or clerk in front of your Outlook and your SAP system and some CRM system, and it's just about copying data from an email to one of those systems and changing addresses or whatever. And then if those systems get closer and closer together, the process mining part of it might tell the RPA, hey, look, it might be faster if we copy data simultaneously instead of sequentially, some very little things. And then one system informs the others and the robots adjusts and gets even faster or whatever. And this is nothing you'll see. And it's technologically, it's already there, right? Mm-hmm. And it happens at a very local part, I think. But it creates efficiency, might create efficiency in those small parts. Might talk about this later on, but also lots of potential downsides, of course, when we have democratization of process management.
Okay. Thanks for these insights there. And talking about research, what are the topics you are researching right now?
Yeah, also good part. Let me start with the more the part that is related to what I just mentioned. So we are doing research a lot of process management from an what we call enterprise architecture management perspective. Mm-hmm. As information systems people, we don't treat processes isolated from all the other parts of the organization. We try to connect and combine all components that you need in your company. So we have organizational structures, we have the processes, we have the data, and we have the IT systems. So, and what I've seen in many companies, that processes are sometimes managed a bit too discoupled, actually, from the IT work, from the data, from the systems. And we are doing research on how to bring this organizationally closer together. Yeah? So we have to create in this world where we always have to change, to adapt to a changing environment, a very dynamic environment. We have to create these digital platforms that allow us to build these, what we call end-to-end processes, but which are also flexible enough or agile enough that we can change processes based on those platforms quite well. So we create, and this is what I see in many companies where we are doing research right now, companies that build big digital platforms. And the airline industry particularly is an industry where we see now a build-up of new platforms, more and more self-development again. While the last 20 years we have moved a lot into standard software, the ERP and SAP world, etc. But now we see more and more, again, these kind of digital platforms, so modular software systems that help us to really, if you take the process of checking in customers until unloading the plane at the very end at another airport, you need lots of strong digital platforms. And the airline industry, it's particularly complex because you interact with lots of other airlines in those alliances. So lots of data sharing between actually competitors and so forth. And this has to be flexible and has to be modular. So we in our research, we focus on how can we create and how can we support this from an organizational perspective, because it becomes very complex. It is usually complex, and it nevertheless forces us to become faster, to build those platforms and to adjust them all the time. So my first research topic is really how can we do process management integrated in an enterprise architecture management world. And based on this, because we have to become faster and more agile, we have built another topic, or we were doing research in another topic, which we call scaled agile organizations. Scaled agile organizations, what's that? That's a restructuring of or a rebuild of the organizational structures where companies think, okay, we can't live with these silos anymore. Mm-hmm. We have, for example, we have business and we have IT, but within business, we also have marketing and sales and product management, product development. And often these are strong silos and people often are working against each other as well. But on the other side, we want to have end-to-end processes, right? Across all those silos. So what companies are doing more and more, because they figured out the organization has to become too rigid, too slow, and too silo-oriented, they create cross-functional teams where they put all the people, all the expertise into a single team. This is not a project team, but a product team. It's a team that is responsible for a certain product or for a certain service, for a certain customer mission. We've done research in banks, for example. Some of the German banks have introduced this. So you are now a team, a cross-functional team, which has IT people, business people, marketing people, maybe legal people, in a group of 8 to 12 people. They have lots of different names for this, like biz dev ops teams or squads or whatever. And they gave them all the resources they need to work on their product and to run this like a little startup within a larger organization. So, for example, you would have at Lufthansa, at the airline of Lufthansa, you would have a team that is responsible for, kind of checking to boarding part of this, or the mobile support of this. Like now more and more Lufthansa passengers are using their Lufthansa app for running through this process quite smoothly. And you would have a squad with business and IT people working together. That's their baby, their mission, their product. And they run for this, and they use agile development and project management approaches for this. And they don't get told by the top what to do. This is very important. They are working quite autonomous. And this is the ideal world, theoretically. So then when we call scaled agile organization, we try to restructure big parts of our organization into those squads or biz DevOps teams. We use the Spotify model for this, or the SAFe framework and stuff like this, tools for this. And there's a huge rebuilding going on in organizations. So at least 2 or 3 banks in Frankfurt, for example, they have put already thousands of people into those organizational structures. And by this also, this is for me as a Wirtschaftsinformatik person, business informatics person, particularly exciting, they take the border between IT and business people away. They put them together into a team, right? Yeah. This is, now, the problem with that is, do we still have processes? Do we still have process management? And this is where I'm a little bit concerned, because in at least one of those banks, I explicitly asked for this and asked them, hey, during the last 10, 15 years, we have created process management, and you have put up process owners and stuff like this, got process governance. Now you put end-to-end process responsibility into a little team, which can't cover the whole process. Yeah, they might design it a bit, and they might support this with nice mobile or whatever technology, but how do we make sure that the process still runs in a smooth way? And they argued, yes, this is true, and we haven't really solved this issue, because these new structures, again, don't have a clear and dedicated process focus. So there are no process owners anymore, for example. And this concerns me a bit. Long story short, this is where we are doing research. We're doing interviews in organizations and trying to understand what works and what does not work here.
Okay. Well, I just thought about the framework for assignment of responsibilities. You might remember from the work we did together, and bringing that together with what you just explained. So having a team of process architects working on the process and together with IT guys and so on, that would be very interesting to have a closer look at.
It's absolutely. So it's very challenging. For us as researchers, it's amazing, because it's really a different... Some people don't see so much new things in that. They argue, isn't this another form of matrix organization, for example? I would argue it is something different. It's quite very different, actually, because this team is now the people's home. So they are committed to this team and to this mission. It's not that we report to do two different directions like in a matrix organization and that you get governed by two different directions. It's you govern more or less yourself and you get just coordinated. And it requires, of course, these new forms of leadership, digital leadership, transformational leadership, or however you call this, that leaders give just kind of directions and these teams and make these teams acting as autonomously as possible. Of course, they have to run into the right direction, of course. And reality, of course, is always something in between. Yeah. Now I've sketched a very theoretical picture of this, but this is what companies try to achieve. Maybe something else. This brings a little bit more to what we also did. So this is also maybe closest to what we would really call process management research, more taking the human into perspective, right? This is where we have done research together, and this is also still one of my ongoing research fields. How do we make sure that the people act and understand our processes? Yeah, the people who work in those processes. How can we involve them in designing and innovating the processes? So what we've looked at with lots of empirical research, how do we enable process orientation in people's minds? So how do we make sure that a person who might have lived and worked for years in a silo, a clerk, accounts payable person, whatever, how can we make sure that this person has the full process in mind, that this person knows which consequences a certain action he or she does has for the following parts of the longer business process? And how can we enable this person to understand this process and to make contributions to improving this process? So how can we, by trainings or whatever different measures, can we increase what we call process orientation of those people? And process orientation means, first of all, people are aware that there is a process. Yeah. If you have worked as an accounts payable person for 10 years, in many cases, you don't see a process anymore, right? So how can we make sure that this person is process oriented and is aware of this? And the second part of this process orientation is, do we know the process? Do we understand the processes? Do we know the steps? Do we know how we interact with each other? And I have to confess that IT has done its part of removing this perspective, right? If you introduce an SAP system, the system tells everyone what he or she has to do. So you create process integration, but people get more and more focused into their silo because the system takes over the coordination. The problem with that is this just works in very stable environments, and we don't have stable environments anymore. We want our people to think about how to improve and how to innovate processes. And for this, they need to understand the processes. So we do empirical research in how can we increase process orientation of our people, of people who are working in processes. And by this, how, when we have higher process orientation, how can we bring them and motivate and enable them to make their own contributions, to get involved in process change initiatives, to come up with like what we call CPI, continuous process improvement, KVP, these approaches. How can we enable them to make meaningful contributions? They can only make meaningful contributions if they know and see the full process, right?
Yeah.
And some companies like Lufthansa, for example, they have excelled in this world. They have created lots of great training programs and approaches to not only make process management a theoretical exercise and having people having certain process manager or process owner roles, but also bringing this process understanding, this process orientation into the workforce, into the people who work in those processes. We also did a study, just if I talk too much.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Just go ahead.
We did a study in hospitals in the Ukraine for the last 4 years. So just 9 months ago, I have been in a city in central Ukraine doing study surveys and workshops with physicians, so-called primary care and interaction with secondary care, what in Germany would be more the general physicians and the more specialists kind of Hausarzt, Facharzt interaction. And what we've seen there, they have, first of all, higher standards in terms of digitalization. I was in hospitals where you don't see any paper anymore. They have centralized databases where the doctor's offices like Hausarztpraxis and the hospitals can have access. So everyone can access the medical records of a patient. Yeah, so very impressive. Probably in Germany it wouldn't be possible because of data protection, but it's very efficient, very effective. So a patient comes into the hospital and they just look up the records and can directly start helping this person. That's just impressive. But we looked into the human side. So how can we help those physicians who are very stressed, and you remember so Ukraine has already been in war for the last 8 years with the Donbas region. So these physicians on a daily basis got injured people from the eastern borders. So we really we're in the middle of these things already a year ago. And so how can we help them to stay process oriented? And by this, to always rethink and reflect how they can what we call reconfigure their processes to make them more efficient, of course, but also more patient friendly, I would call it, because we all want from our medical system that physicians have more time for taking care of the people, not only doing their work and documenting or their official work and documenting, but also having some spare time for talking to the people, for treating them, for the psychological parts, that they can kind of adjust, so to say, to this medical environment. So this is also how achieve process orientation and helping them to implement process changes themselves, not top down. Of course, the city council, the city, the representative for the healthcare system, of course, also wants better processes and change all the time. But I think in this world, it's important that it comes bottom up as well, right? So if we have these teams, whether these are the biz DevOps mixed cross-functional teams, or whether this is a group of physicians in a hospital, increase their process understanding, their process orientation, and by this their willingness and ability to contribute to better processes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that already goes into the direction of new process, I would say, or it's already at the core of new process to get to more human-centric BPM there. Yeah. That's great to hear that you're doing research on that. From your experience with regards to this research, what are your top 3, I would say, recommendations to our listeners to rethink processes to get to a more human-centric BPM approach?
Yeah. First of all, of course, let's get the people out of the silos. There's different approaches to do this. It costs time and money, I know. Yeah. But let's get the people out of the silos, involve them, make them part of process design, of process change, etc. We need more involvement on a broader base. Of course, we have our process specialists, we have our architects, we have our process owners who have to take responsibility and accountability. But the more we get the people out of the silos to see the full process, and not only see it, but also get involved in how should our process look like in a better world, so to say. This is important. And we do this by creating cross-functional teams, which over time also, of course, become silos, right? So this needs to be dynamic, yeah? So this might be the first and most important one. Then second, I think, is we might, to take people with us when we change a process, we might should look more into what project management calls change management. So if we have a big project, we have learned it's not only the project itself, like let's say SAP implementation or something like that, a big rollout of a new IT system or a restructuring of the organization. These are the big changes, and we have learned how to do those projects. But we also have learned that it requires more than just a nice implementation plan or design, implementation and testing or whatever. That it also requires what we call change management. And companies, I'm pretty sure that Lufthansa has an organizational unit as like this as well. I know this from DHL, for example. They have at the very top level of the group, they have a change management practice. And it's not a big group, but they bring those experts into every change project they do to take care of the people, to make sure how to involve the people or to make sure that people get involved and they have the methods to do this in an effective way. For example, making sure that people understand the why of a change. Why do we get a new IT system or whatever? And taking them really culturally and socially with all their often negative emotions with them. This is what we call change management. And this happens in the big projects, but I think we can learn from this also in process management when we do smaller projects, process changes. So what are the tools? What are the methods? What are the ways of thinking that those change managers in projects, in big projects have that we might use and maybe adapt to process management in terms of changing processes? This might be a second one. And the third one, it's kind of related to the first. I like this idea of cross-functional agile teams. That we put people from different disciplines together into a team, not just for a project, because the project is somewhat over, and then people go back. No, the organizational structure has to change permanently to this, and then it's rather after a couple of, let's say, 1 to 2 years, you might rotate people between those teams, but that you have cross-functional agile teams. They work with agile approaches, which makes them more reactive to what changes are needed and brings the people that should work together into a room, right? Like a startup who has all hopefully expertise they need to do something, and so that they can reshape their own processes, I would call. With all the downsides that we are currently researching in this field as well. There's lots of downsides and risks with that, but I think this potential strength are quite promising, and companies which do this in a good way, they have made progress, a good progress with that. So that's kind of it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. Thank you very much. That's very good to know, and it's already very human-centric. I would say that's pretty cool. And what I experience is that all these human-centric topics are, at the very front of the BPM development. So with regards to maturity levels, a lot of organizations are still documenting their processes and now learning how to start to manage and improve and so on. And all these automation topics, AI, they are way ahead, I would say. But what would you say, how can one, as an organization, for example, what can they do to stay at the very front of the BPM development?
First of all, I'm a researcher, so we are doing research, and a good thing to stay in the front of BPM development is also having some connection to research and to learn what research has to offer. Yeah? So this might be one part, and then of course experimenting. I would argue if we find some capacities in the organization and give people some freedom using pilots, for example, to do some experimentation with both the new technology tools that we have, RPA, process mining and all that, but also for these human things, getting people out of the silos. This requires some time, some capacity. But I think then that people might be willing themselves to get engaged, to learn, to do their own research or little projects and experiments. That's what I've seen. So I'm not only doing research, I'm also teaching. I'm teaching regular students, but also lots of MBA students, which are in their job and which are fascinated. And if they get the chance to play around and to do some pilot projects with, for example, RPA and process mining, and so they run. They are so motivated and want to improve their business area, their processes. And by this, the organization learns. Yeah. So keeping people motivated to do research, could also say, use this word here, do their experiments and learn and learn how to use certain tools and methods is important. But of course, also engage with the real research that happens in the academic world.
Yeah, and I heard about something which I found very fascinating, and we tried that out a few years ago, which is called action design research. There are different academic approaches to stay at the very front of the development of specific topics, and we apply that to BPM. Can you give some insights into how this type of research can look like?
Absolutely. So in the academic world, we have very clearly specified research methods, and one of them, as I just mentioned, is action design research. It's let's say an engineering approach, basically. It's about building something and evaluating whether it works, whether it improves something. This is how engineers are working. And there's, of course, certain steps and procedures for this to make sure that this is scientifically sound and that we also can publish it, of course, that the journals can testify the quality and the validity of this research. But action design research is researchers going into an organization like Lufthansa, and together, based on scientific knowledge, on the research that we have built and accumulated as a community, to create something and test it in the organization. So action research is actually a researcher goes into the organization and changes something and measures whether it has the intended effect. This is action research. Action design research means you build something in the organization. From a scientific, or let's say scientific philosophical perspective, this is something different to what many researchers what we've done for many, more or less centuries. Actually, at least social researchers have argued, no, we need to keep distance to what we want to research. We don't want to influence it, because if we influence it, we can't measure the truth, so to say, anymore. So stay in distance. But here we do the opposite. We go into the direction. And to make it concrete, this means, for example, as we did with a PhD student. So this was a great project. So we hired a PhD student, a research assistant, who went to the company and changed things. In this case, designed with you guys a process governance framework, a really big thing, defining new roles, new coordination structures, which help us to implement and to keep processes implemented. And maybe a step back, we did this with 2 PhD students. The first PhD student was asked to build a process standardization approach. So how, as a company, can we standardize business processes? So we have different sites, and we know that those different sites have kindly different processes, right? And because historically grown, let's say it this way. And but we want to have them standardized because we want to have the same quality standards and so forth, same efficiency standards. So this PhD student, together with the company, designed a approach and then tested it directly, right? So doing process standardization using this tool and showing that this tool works. And then we had the problem, now we standardize processes. How do we make sure that they keep standardized? You might standardize processes and tell people, hey, in the future, you have to work along this workflow. But they, in 6 or 12 months from now, they might decide, oh, no, I don't like this process. I go back to my old process. So how do you make sure that processes remain standardized and remain efficient? This is why we introduced the next PhD student with the next big project, creating process governance, defining like a Rocky model, not only, but responsibilities and accountabilities, different roles, And this was a very, very, I think, strong and visible research project. So if a company decides for let's really collaborate with a university and take even some money, some budgets, and spending and paying a research person, a research team, maybe even. Yeah? It's companies pay so much into consultancies, but those consultants are there for a couple of months sometimes, and of course they do also their great jobs. But with a researcher, you can do this over a longer term, and you can really build on creating scientific stuff. And we published lots of those things that we've learned. So I think it's one of our greatest process management research projects that we did on those process governance. And this is what action design research is about. So researchers from university going into the company, together with the company, implementing something and testing the effect. And in this case, we did not build some IT or something technological. We built an organizational model. We built a governance framework, right? But this researcher, this is important, he or she also has to leave one foot in the university. Yeah? So this person needs to be connected to the department, to the institute and the university, to remain this research and publication cycle. Of course, they also want to do their PhD after a couple of years. But this creates a very intense, a human-based, a people-based knowledge link between university and companies. And we as universities can learn a lot, and the companies can I would say, from my perspective, benefit a lot from this.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm already planning a follow-up episode on this one with my perspective on project like this. I just thought maybe there should be a third episode interviewing the PhD student as well and getting her perspective onto the topic there. Yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah. So this was a very big example, but there are also smaller ones like having students working on their bachelor master thesis and sponsoring topics from the company world to university. That's possible as well, or?
This works as well. Imagine we together had an MBA team, a team of MBA students who did, I think, was about what are the costs of process management, right? So process management has processes itself. So, for example, the process of documenting a process. Yeah. So documenting a business process is a business process itself. But we don't know what the costs of this are. And this was a team of 2 MBA students, and they had a couple of months time to make a cost analysis, a process cost ABC analysis. And there's this. Of course, those research topics have to be scoped much smaller and have to be cut very, very clearly and lean to make sure that students can do this. But this was also I think I like this project that these 2 students did. Or to give you another example, just so we have master thesis and bachelor thesis for sure. This is an approach that we always can use to work with companies. But of course, the companies sometimes have hard times to understand that it needs to be a research project with master bachelor thesis. They think, okay, we can get a cheap student, so to say, instead of a consultant to build us something. It always has to have a scientific part of this. This does not mean that there is a chapter 2 in the master thesis, which is about theoretical foundation. No. The master thesis is, at least in Bamberg, we have a master of science. So the master thesis has to be a scientific project. Science means we create some new knowledge. We do not only solve a problem of a company. We just solve problems of companies which are new and unique so that the general scientific community can learn from this. Yeah. So this is where I then collaborate with companies to do a master thesis project, for example. Yeah, it shouldn't be just a consulting project. It should be where we can learn. Yeah, where we as wider audience can learn. So in Germany we call science Wissenschaft. So creating knowledge. Yeah, this is what science is about. And if a master thesis is about creating new knowledge, which is valuable for all of us, for all of the experts community, so to say, then it's an appropriate project for a master thesis. If it's just, hey, let's do a process analysis and identifying some opportunity optimization potentials, this is a consulting project. For me, this wouldn't be a master thesis. So sometimes I have to teach companies a little bit about to understand what the master thesis is about. But to give you another example, because it happened just last week, we have here in Bamberg, we have a master program in information systems, and one of those courses is managing digital transformation. And this is where we teach students exactly this holistic perspective that I mentioned at the beginning. How do we transform an organization at the organizational level, structures and processes, at the IT level, and at the culture level, to become ready for a more digital future? And we do lots of theory and case studies, but we also, in this semester, we work together with an SME, with a small company here in Bamberg, which builds kind of per order, it builds assembly lines. So it puts robots and lots of technology together for, let's say, an automotive company to build a piece for a car, or to build an engine for vacuum cleaners or stuff like this. So it's a company with 100 people, and they build robot-based assembly line stuff, equipment. Very exciting. So always just on order, so to say. And we had all the students of our course put into 5 teams, and we sent them to this company to do an analysis of all the layers that I just mentioned: structure, processes, IT systems, culture, and to come up with a transform picture, a target picture, and some roadmap how to get to a better picture. And they did a marvelous job. So we just on Friday afternoon, we had the final presentations of those teams. And they found that even in this little company where everyone knows everyone, they first of all identified silos. Silo between procurement and production. Although there's 3, 4, 5 people in each of them, and they're sitting in the same building. There's silos. And they implemented, and they did not implement, but they designed new ways of how to integrate them technologically. So in terms of, they created a prototype of a virtual Kanban board, which would be placed in all the departments, but also on a human base. They, for example, introduced a workshop format where, how do you call Azubis in English? I don't know. So
apprentices.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That those young people would create workshops on teaching the old people, the long being with this company, experienced people, to get out of their silos and to try new things and to come up with their own ideas of redesigning processes. Although they are smaller, like end-to-end procurement, production, sales in a company with just 100 people, but it's still a very complex process, right? And so here we had 5 teams with lots of great suggestions, lots of different suggestions. And this is also a way how you could, we are always looking for company partners who are willing to open their doors. Of course, they have to prepare and provide documentation. They have to provide interview partners. Imagine 5 teams running into a company with just 100 people, and they want to do interviews with the procurement people, with the production people, with leadership, and so forth. It's a challenge for a small company, but we'll see what the learnings are, or which of those learnings might get implemented during the next month or years in this company.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so we can now officially ask our listeners if there is someone out there thinking about, I have a problem here, a question there, and I would love to have a scientific view on that, to hand in their cases, and then maybe you can have a closer look onto, and we can check out what to do with it. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So people out there, if you have something which is related to new process and it might make sense to have a research perspective on that, so feel free to hand in your cases. I'll put the contact data into the show notes so we can pick up this later on. So that's great. It would be really interesting to, also accompany that and have another follow-up interview with the topic sponsor and you and the students as well, if there is something we can create out of this interview here. That's cool. Thanks, Daniel.
Would be great. Would be marvelous. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So, wow, I could continue for hours, but I think with regards to the time, we can now start the descent and go to the landing here. And just as a wrap up for the listeners, what is your key message to rethink processes?
Yeah. So try to put the people who work in processes into the driver's seat, or at least in the co-driver's seat, so to say. Get them out of the silos, and think holistically. Yeah, these good processes in our times need to be adaptable. I don't want to stretch this agile term, but they need to be adaptable. They need to be built on a state-of-the-art modular IT platform, digital platform. We need those process management teams that work in a more, now I have to say it again, agile mode, right? And so think holistically, keep the link between processes, IT systems, digital platforms, and the organizational structures where we might put people differently together into teams in the future. Try to think what's the pros and of course also what's the cons and risks of that. But I think we need this in the future to have processes where we can do changes faster, where we can adapt faster. I think this, would be my key takeaways, so to say.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And where can our listeners go to if they would like to learn more about your activities, your research, and so on?
About my activities, we publish, but of course I know that practitioners sometimes have hard times to read scientific journals and scientific publications. We try, of course, to put stuff on our website, and we do put stuff on our website as well. And then, of course, I think the most effective way of learning is collaborating, exchanging thoughts, talking to each other, and maybe set up some little or bigger project from a, like this challenge with this group of students up to a PhD student to collaborate. But website and publications are the most straightforward link to our activities, of course.
Okay, very good. I'll put the links into the show notes as well, so you can directly jump to Daniel's website from there. So that's great. And as an outlook, I'm always asking my interview participants here, what topic, methodology, tool, expert would you recommend to talk to have a closer look onto to learn more about how to rethink processes? So what would you recommend there, or whom?
When we take this holistic idea more and more into consideration, processes, structures, digital platforms, it's always not sure how much advertising I must do, but there's at the MIT, there's the Center for Information Systems Research, and for example, Jeannie Ross over there has done so great work on putting those different things together, like, let's call it enterprise architecture management from a strategic perspective, not this what many companies have implemented in terms of enterprise architecture, where it's more about documentation of how systems support processes, etc. No, more the strategic perspective. How should we really rethink the interplay between structures, processes, and digital systems? I think this might be very valuable. We also use their materials in our teaching a lot. So she just published a book 3 years ago, I think, Jeannie Ross, Design for Digital. This tackles all this points. Design. Okay. So how should an organization be designed for the digital age? This, of course, includes processes as one big component, the central component, actually. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to look that up as well.
If you want to look at something else rather than our stuff.
Great. So, we already landed the aircraft, the interview here. And before we leave, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners before we exit the aircraft?
I think I hope that I made my points, that I shared my thoughts, my 5 cents in a way that you grasp it. It's always good to connect to researchers, not only to me, of course. There's so many great process management researchers out there. There's events that you might look at. There's conferences on where academics present their newest stuff. For example, in September, you always have the as I just mentioned in the beginning, the worldwide BPM, Business Process Management Conference, where the research community of process management meets. It's every year in September. The worldwide conference in information systems does lots on research in this field as well. This is always happening in December, this year in Copenhagen. So yeah, made me think about attending a scientific conference. I think, Mirko, you have attended once at least as well, right?
Yeah, several
you have
times.
To tell how easy to follow or how valuable it is. But I think, everything that helps to also bridge links between academia and the managerial world might help you.
Yeah, definitely beneficial. And I can absolutely recommend to go there. And I already thought about looking up the dates and the locations for the next ones. And maybe I'm going there as well. And maybe that's a great opportunity for other people from the LinkedIn BPM bubble out there to meet at one of these conferences in the future. So let's see, and let's have a look into the calendars and see what we can realize there. Perfect. So with regards to our flight experience here, the interview experience, how would you describe the flight with just 3 words?
It was a very smoothly running process, actually, right? or no, let's say something different. Given the very individual caring and treatment, very nice hosting from your side, could also say first class experience, actually, in terms of since it has been a flight with you.
Yeah, great, Daniel. Thank you so much for being guest at the New Process podcast, and I'm looking forward to meeting you somewhere in reality in the future. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.
I do as well. It was a pleasure talking to you, Mirko. Thanks for hosting me.
Let's recap today's New Process inspiration.
Wow. What a holistic, comprehensive overview on how to get to the cutting edge of BPM. So reviewing the interview, actually, I was not really surprised when talking about the hot research topics that he listed there. On the one hand side, process mining, as well as RPA, or robotic process automation, on the other hand. But I found it very interesting bringing both together as something like AI-based smart automation. So let's see what the future will bring there. When talking about Daniel's topics, I was triggered by his research on scaled agile organizations. So examples like the Spotify model or SAFe framework, and also the problems he sees there with regards to losing process orientation when introducing frameworks like these. And I was spontaneously directly wondering if the framework which I'm using as role concept for the new process lifecycle, the new process role concept based on the framework for assignment of responsibilities, which we developed together in a joint research project with Daniel and his team a few years ago, if this framework can help to solve these problems. So if you are working in a scaled agile organization environment, something like that, and you are interested in thinking about how to increase process orientation again, would be great if you reach out to me to discuss how this role concept could be used there, because I'm really convinced that it will help there as well. Yeah. I also realized when he was talking about his research activities that he is already doing research on new process. So how to make sure that the people understand, adopt processes. And if you're interested in that as well, we can also have another deep dive episode, maybe with one of his researchers out of his team working on that topic, or even with the PhD student, which I know did research on that in her thesis as well. So that will be quite interesting. I also like his 3 recommendations on how to rethink processes. The first one, to get the people out of the silos. Yeah, definitely. That's something we should facilitate. Then the second recommendation was to look more into change management and apply change management methods in process management. Yeah, definitely. That's a big part of all the new process activities, to take the people into account. So that's very good. Also to have a closer look onto change management methods and tools. And finally, a third recommendation was on cross-functional agile teams. So to bring all people working on and in one process together in one room or one team. And that also fits perfectly to the new process idea. So thank you for that, Daniel. Yeah, then we talked about how to stay at the front of the BPM development. And there, yeah, definitely his answer was to do research, to do experiments together with universities, academia. So not only thinking about having interns, bachelor master thesis, but also thinking about, like the example he pointed out, having an MBA project or a master program where the students go to the company and have a closer look onto a business or organizational problem there, and try to solve that with academic, scientific methods. That's really interesting. And he also told us about the action design research approach, which is a scientific approach to build and test a solution in an organization, which is really interesting. And maybe this is also another deep dive together with the PhD student. So maybe we can combine that with the research that Daniel is doing on how to get people to act and understand processes, together with some insights into this action design research topic or example he pointed out there. So if you're interested in that, feel free to send me feedback, and I can see what I can do on that. And finally, we also talked about how to make this available to you as well. So we officially call for cases. So if you have an BPM, hopefully also somehow new process related challenge in your BPM organization, your approach right now, and you think it would help to reach out to Daniel and his team and to get an academic view onto this problem, then would be great. Yeah, if you contact me, just send me an email to mirko@newprocesslab.com, and I'll also put something into the show notes so that you can pick that up and contact Daniel and me there as well. Yeah, and I think that's it for today. In the next episode, I'll give you my 3 advices on how to push your BPM ahead. So we go even further than what we discussed in this episode with Daniel or the episode before with Michael. Yeah, there I'll put my ideas together to push your BPM ahead. So for today, thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye and auf Wiedersehen.
You've been listening to the New Process Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode for more tools, methods, and best practices to rethink your process and push it to the next level. Thank you for listening.
Before you leave, just a very brief info on what I'm planning to do. So I'm planning to have something like an Ask Mirko format here on the podcast, where you can hand in your BPM new process related questions, and I try to answer them or try to find answers for your questions. So if you would like to hand in your questions, please go to newprocesslab.com/askmirko, MIRKO. I also put the link into the show notes, and let's see if I'm able to answer your questions. Have a great day. Bye-bye.